I'm Vanessa Konecki, and this is Research Administration in a Nutshell, a series where I make short videos about different activities that we engage in as research administrators and what it's like to be an RA. Drop a like on the video or subscribe to the channel on YouTube for more research administration stuff. And a massive, massive thank you to all of the supporters on Patreon who help keep my channel alive. More information on how you can support at the end, but for now, let's get going. The RPPR is an electronic progress report system that the NIH uses to report on scientific, administrative, compliance, fiscal progress over the year, and basically to take a pulse check to see where everything is at. This is typically where your investigator will disclose all of the things that they've done in the past year, whether they've published or not, if there have been any inventions, where the money has been spent. There's a whole lot of things that the NIH is asking for in these RPPRs. However, though we are responsible as research administrators for reviewing this document and making sure that all the information is correct, and in some cases even updating it, for example, the administrative official information or some other things, the PI is largely responsible for filling out this entire application, this entire progress report. The only thing to consider is that if there is a sub-awardee, you're going to need to reach out to the sub-awardee to get their documents so that you can incorporate them into the stuff that you're responsible for. And by their documents, I mean specifically their all personnel report and their other support document, but we'll come to that in a little bit. So typically the PI is responsible for it. We all get the email. So the RA gets the email, the signature official gets the email, and the PI gets the email. And even though we get the email, we can't actually do anything with it until the investigator goes in and initiates it. So he has to go in, initiate the progress report, and then once it's initiated, at that point, the progress report remains with them. When they are ready for it to come to us, they can route it to us using the system, and then it comes to us. Okay, there is an email template that you can use to send to your PIs in case they don't know how to initiate a progress report, which if no one's done it before, they may not know. So what are we doing? As RAs, we review the RPPR for compliance, we update the all personnel report, we confirm effort, and we're going to talk about these in way more detail. We contact the subcontracts for documentation, we talked about that. And then we also calculate and report on the budgetary carryover. Okay, we review it for the final sort of OK before we send it on to the signature official, who then submits it. So the different types of RPPRs that exist is you have your annual RPPR, and this is the one that basically you do at the end of every year to report on progress. Every year to report on progress. There is the final RPPR, which is at the very end. We're done with the grant. This is our final RPPR. And then there is the interim RPPR. So if you are submitting a resubmission, a renewal, then you can submit an interim progress report that's what it's called. And then if the grant is funded, it becomes the interim progress report, like just a progress report between segments. If it is not funded, it then goes into the final progress report status. Okay. This is a breakdown, sort of generally speaking, of what you're going to find in the RPPR. And I have some pins noted here. These are things that we're going to be needing to spend a little bit more time on. So I'll talk about them in a little bit more detail. The ones with the red flag are things that we're going to want to pay serious attention to because of the implications and the cost to the institution in the event that mistakes are made or certain things are left out. But this is a general overview of what you'll find in the progress report. Now, each of these sections are along the top of the page, and you just work your way across the top of the page. And I've always loved RPPR simply because of that. I feel like it's very orderly. You just go from the left to the right and you're done with it. Now, your PI is going to be responsible for filling in a lot of these, and you can use this resource to share that. You can share this resource with, and you can share this resource with them to sort of help them along the way in terms of filling out what goes in. Sometimes you guys know exactly what it is that they need to be entering into each space, and other times they're not entirely sure. So this is something you can send them if they're like, listen, I don't know what to put in here, or I've never done an RPPR before. You can send this to them. There's a Word document version of it as well if you want to send that, so they can just sort of fill it in there in like the Word text portion. Now, something to keep in mind in terms of organizational responsibilities. There are some organizations, and depending on where you are at in the institution, your role related to RPPR may be a little bit greater than it would be if you were, say, in the central office. So if you are someone who is embedded in a department and you work for the investigator or in that space, you may also be the person who actually enters the text into the RPPR. So like, you're not the one who writes it, but they basically get you an email and it's got all the information in it, and then you copy paste it, put it where it goes, upload the documents that they send you, and so on, right? So I have had positions where that is part of the job, in terms of they do all the work and then you route it to them, they review it, they say yes, everything's okay, they review it back to you, and then you route it back. So you basically go through a different approval process, but we were responsible for a little bit more administrative stuff. If that's the case, then the Word document version of this will be really helpful, because then you can send this to them, have them just sort of fill out the Word document, and then send that back to you, and you can just work your way up down the list and then fill it out. So the areas where we have to take special note of as research administrators is participants is the first one. So we are responsible for listing all the individuals who contributed 1 calendar month of effort or more. Now, the PI has to be included there, and key personnel are required to invest measurable effort, and so they should also be at about 1.0 calendar month. Otherwise, the question becomes, is this measurable effort? There are detailed instructions of how you can round up depending on how, because like sometimes these systems can go to like 6 decimal places related to somebody's effort. So you can there's some instructions that'll show you how to deal with that. So basically, the goal for us here is we're gonna go down the list of people who were paid off of this project, or who contributed effort to this project, regardless of where they were paid from. So let's say somebody devoted effort to this project, but they were paid from a discretionary account because there weren't enough funds left on the project, or because that's how it was set up, because maybe this person has a fellowship or something. In that case, you will include that person still. So you're going to include the effort for these people. Now, the way that we calculate the effort is that typically we only have the previous 9 months, assuming a 12-month period. And the next 3 months we have to anticipate out. And so what I typically do is I will talk to the PI, and like sometimes you'll be able to tell if somebody's been devoting 0.6 calendar months all the way through, right? Or 1.2 calendar months all the way through. Chances are they're going to continue to put that in there, 1.2 calendar months. Always ask your PI, because you never know what things are happening, but ask your PI. They're like, yep. And then you enter in that information for every single person. So basically you've got some actuals and then some projected for as close as you can. Everyone who is in there, they need to have Commons IDs, and everyone who's entered in needs to have a Commons ID. And if there's anyone who was listed as key who is not devoting effort now that you do not have prior approval for, this would be the time to disclose that they're not devoting effort, put the approval letter in there, and get all of that justification in here. The other area that can be complicated, and this isn't something that we typically, we don't really do anything with it, it's just important to know that it's a little bit difficult, is the human subject section. So that's section G4B. So this component actually involves several different complex steps, including a clinicaltrials.gov component and the assist component, and there's a lot of reconciliation that's done on the back end, but not stuff that we can see. So if you are in the RPPR, you can see that there is human subjects work that needs to be done. And if you run a validation check, it will give you an error because it'll say this isn't completed if it's necessary. But you can't actually go in and see the report, okay? So your investigator will need to go in, update the report, and once it is updated and received, then it shows as completed in the RPPR, and then when you run the validation check, it will not give you an error. So the reason there's actually very detailed instructions in the PI guide is simply because this is an area typically where investigators and RAs and signature officials, if you haven't done it a lot, tend to get stuck because something or the other isn't working. Now, let's talk about the budget reporting portion, because that's also where we get heavily involved. There are 2 different ways that the budget is done. So one way is under SNAP, and typically the information is going to be in your NOGA. So it'll say whether it is under SNAP or not under SNAP. And so the SNAP basically, it means that it kind of streamlines the whole process, says, listen, as long as you don't have more than 25% in unobligated balance, you can carry that forward, have a nice life, and moving on, right? However, in some cases, you will be asked to provide detailed budget information, and that typically happens, that will typically say it's not under SNAP, or that it requires that detail. So it's not unusual for it to happen in certain mechanisms, but typically more commonly you'll see a SNAP process. Now, to determine the unobligated balance, you're going to need a few things. First, you're going to need to know the subawards, if there's any subawards what is their unobligated balance going to be? So you're going to have to reach out to the subawards. And I recommend as soon as the RPPR comes out, you have like something on your calendar. It's very helpful because then you start to get a notice about it a little bit earlier. So I typically we'll do like 15 days before it's supposed to be generated. And I'll say something like progress report coming up, right? And it's not, and I'll put the details in there, but the reason why I do that is because then I start to mentally prepare myself knowing, okay, that's coming up. Because honestly, as RAs, when we're not dealing with a thing, it is out of mind, right? It is just over there. And then typically what happens is like a deadline comes out of nowhere or something will happen. Oh, what is it? How did that happen so quickly? Putting these calendar reminders in a little bit in advance gives you a time to sort of just like almost wake up slowly in the morning. Be like, hold on, give me a second. I'm going to do this really slowly. Okay, so we first have to figure out, so you'll reach out to the subawarding institution, you'll find out from them what their carry forward is, and then you will also do this calculation. And the way that you do that calculation is you're basically going to identify what is the current fiscal year's award plus any carry over from the prior years. So your prior year carry forward gets counted in with the current award to create your new baseline. Then you're going to put all of the expenses that you have incurred so far. Then you're going to work out what are the projected expenses for the next 3 months. So talk to your PI, find out what's encumbered, see the salaries, so on and so forth, right? You get as close to a number as you can. If that number is less than 25% of that total cost that we talked about, that the current fiscal year's authorization, the total approved budget, if it's less than 25%, then you say, yep, it's less than 25%, and you can carry it forward, no problem. If it's more than 25%, then you do need to provide a justification, and typically you'll need it to be a little bit more detailed. One area that I don't go too deeply into in this particular conversation is other support. We are also responsible for assisting the investigators with their other support and completing that documentation. That is a section on its own, so you're welcome. You can check out the link up there. Absolutely go watch that and you'll get the other support section of it. But because I already had a video about it, I kind of decided to put that aside. So the other area where we get typically involved is other support. Some areas that you want to make note of in terms of red flags. The first is the reduction of effort greater than 25% without prior approval from the NIH. So NIH, per the NIH policy, if any investigator can reduce their effort up to 24.99% without additional approval from the NIH. But if you go higher than 25%, it's questionable if you're still going to be able to contribute the way that you said, and is that a change in scope? And so you're required to get permission for that. In some cases, it makes sense. In other cases, it doesn't. It's all about the justification. So you always want to make sure that you're calculating committed effort, devoted effort, so you can make sure that they're within the 25%. So because you need to know that in advance, you don't want to find out accidentally. There's a calculation that will help you do that. The other thing you want to look at is the foreign components. You will not be responsible for making sure that your investigator discloses all of their foreign interests. However, it is important for them to know that it is necessary to report in the other support document and then in section E, impact. Now, typically, if it's related to this particular project, we will be involved, we'll know about it, and so we'll enter that in impact. But for other things where the investigator may be involved in foreign relationships that are considered significant, which the details are here, we may not know about that, right? So the things that we do know about, great. We'll make sure that they're on there. The things that we don't know about, it is on them to make sure that they are compliant with the policy and putting it into the other support, but we can let them know. So where are we at now? So the RPPR has been generated. It's been initiated. You've reached out to all the subs. You've gotten all the information back from the subs. There is, you can use this email to reach out to them and get all the things that you need. You have the numbers. You've done your calculations. Everything is copacetic. Now, your PI has done their business. They've sent it to you, routed it to you. You've reviewed it. You've added your stuff. You've now validated it. So the next step is to check it for errors. So you want to make sure that there's no errors and no warnings. Warnings, it can go in with warnings, but check them because it may be something that needs to actually be addressed and it got missed, but definitely check to make sure. And then errors, which have to be resolved before you'll be able to submit it. Okay. So validate those until you get no errors and approved warnings, as it were. Then you will route that RPPR to your signature official. Okay. As part of all of this, there are compliance documentation that will need to be gathered. So for example, the conflict of interest will need to be done. You'll need to make sure that they have their responsible conduct of research. Whatever training is required in accordance with research grants and this particular research grant, those will need to be completed. If there is IACUC or IRB approval, you'll need those updated documents. So any updated compliance documents will also need to be updated here. Keep in mind that there are electronic systems that many organizations use that streamline a great many of these steps. And so what I'm sort of outlining to you is the basic kind of like, this is how an RPPR would go on average, right? There may be variations within organizations. Some may want you to do more, some may want you to do less, but this will give you a general idea of what you might be doing when you are working on an RPPR. And you can use this checklist to make sure that you stay on track. Thank you for watching. Another massive thank you to the supporters on Patreon who help keep my channel alive. You can support for less than $5 a month. Check the video description for links to the Patreon, LinkedIn, and my website. And as always, have a great day.